Hi, welcome back to the Future Business Forum. I'm Tristan Allen from Room 44 at Silverstone in the UK, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Brian and Rachel, who will introduce themselves now. Rachel.
Thank you very much. I'm an executive coach and an HR consultant focusing around the future of work.
And
Brian.
My name's Brian Wright, and I help run a brand design business called Yellow Yo-Yo.
And we're going to have a chat today about, we're going to continue the conversation we had last week actually around the subject of resetting and how we see business evolving out of the COVID crisis pandemic. We've been having a chat before we started recording, just to get our story straight. It's not going to go that way at all. We're going to fall over each other. But I think I'm going to kick it off by saying that generally speaking, although businesses are trying to find their way back to whatever normal looks like now, we really probably haven't seen the full extent of the effect of COVID. And taking the lead of the WHO, who've just come out and said that really, although some countries are coming out of the first peak of COVID, we really haven't seen the end of this. It's going to get better, worse before it gets better. So I just want to throw it open to Rachel, first of all, to talk about maybe the human cost of what businesses will have to do going forward, and then we'll bring it back to the business effect as well, the effect on business. Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Tristan. So the human cost, we don't know. So, for example, the redundancy from furlough, we don't know. We don't know what decisions companies will make for those people who the government have funded for furlough until probably the next couple of months as the furlough scheme starts to ebb away. So at the moment, the IMF are reporting our unemployment rate for the UK at 4.8, and the USA, as an example, is 10.4. I think once the furlough scheme finishes, we'll see that increase dramatically. I know there's lots of people are very concerned and worried about what it means to them personally. There's a lot of conflict anyway. I've seen in some companies where some staff have been furloughed and they've had time off, had nice weather, been able to homeschool the kids without too much worry, but they're really beginning to feel anxious about, well, I obviously am not needed in the company. What's going to happen to my role? Versus other people who haven't been furloughed and still trying to homeschool, and they're very frustrated that they didn't get the time off, but also grateful they've still got a job. So there's an awful lot of complexity in most companies where furlough has occurred. I think there's going to have a big impact on mental health. There's people talking about it already, especially amongst children, and trying to get them back to school for the socialization. I think it's the same for grown-ups as well. How do we continue to keep moving forward and for us to feel that we have value for what we're contributing to society in our roles with our families? So I think the moment, I think it's just let's wait and see what the true extent will be when it comes to how many people will be employed, what the world will look like. Lots of companies are also taking stock as to what they are doing from a skill set. Is that still relevant, or do they have to change what they're offering? Do their skills of their employees need to change as well? So even those who are still employed will also have concerns as to whether they will still remain relevant and what can they do to remain relevant. So I think it's an area to keep watching.
Yeah, I think from the people I've talked to over the last week since we last talked, I've had conversations with several people who have been going into the office every now and again, and they're saying there's this sort of really odd feeling of, yeah, it's good to be back, but they feel in between about what should be happening. It looks like a lot of people haven't actually set the rules on returning really very well. Rachel, I think a couple of weeks ago you were talking about how chief execs, how boards of directors have to set the rules, have to make sure that people who are furloughed are as engaged as people who are still at work, and everybody's a cohort still. I'm not seeing a lot of that from the people I'm talking to anyway. And I think we're all used to having a plan, having a route, And I think all of us are still, we haven't got that route. I think as a country, the UK hasn't really got that clarity. We haven't, you know, at the moment we're, I know you're not supposed to say these sorts of things on this sort of thing because it's a timestamp, but Leicester has had is being locked down again. And you see the local people, or the local mayor saying, actually, we didn't think there was a problem until the government told us there was. There's this sort of, seems to be this time lag between information getting out and the detail being clear to everybody. I don't know whether you've seen that, Tristan, and who you've been talking to.
Well, I've seen a number of things. You know, at a personal level, we've had friends who have been trying to emigrate, who couldn't get out of the country during lockdown. They've finally got back out, and they've left now. I've got other friends who have gone to the US to, see dying parents off because they had to get there quickly. Now they're not going to get back anytime soon because, as we know, America's not a terribly welcome. People from America aren't terribly welcome in some places like the UK at the moment. Well, things are as bad as they are there, and apparently not getting better anytime soon. We've got, I was talking to a couple yesterday, some very old friends of mine, and he didn't know until yesterday when he got his July British Airways roster that he'd been furloughed for another month. That's 2 days before the month starts. And he found out that it was probably going to happen by looking at a forum that his colleagues have online. So the company haven't even effectively announced that their furlough has been extended, other than to send them a list of days they should have been working on. And his wife, who works in the recruitment sector in public service, doesn't know when she's going back to work or if, but she does know that the floor that she used to work on in the building she used to work in has been cleared out. It's been stripped. So, you know, as far as a mental health is concerned, these aren't terribly healthy practices on the part of employers. And I don't know if without question, there are good employers and there are bad employers. It's always been the way. But these are major establishments and organizations who obviously suffering massive reductions in revenues. Yet the people that work for them aren't, apparently, their focus just now. Now, I'm sure that's not how it really is seen around the board table. But I liken this to the old story that I've said a few times, not here, but in other places. You know, when you look at a board table and the people sitting around it making strategic decisions, they're all sitting looking the same way, and everything else is happening behind them. It's just illustrative of the way that companies behave sometimes. They get sucked into their own hype a little bit. And I think maybe some of the values that companies have placed on what's important in their business will be questioned going forwards by those of us that will be looking for work again.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. The very thought went through my head then. A friend of mine works for a travel business, and his company is a really big company. He works in business travel. There's not going to be a lot of that going forward very quickly from the UK. He's been on furlough. He found out, a bit like the person you just said, he's been put on furlough again for another month or 6 weeks. And then he found out that the office he works out of has just been, they're not going to take the lease anymore. And they've also released at the same time the fact they are going to make people redundant, but they're not telling where. But it's a subtle hint, isn't it, that your office has been closed. I think, Rachel, you're really hot on the way that managers, boards, directors should have this sort of open communication, and there should be a very sort of open culture in businesses. You can see the situation where you've got companies who are struggling to survive, struggling to see where their next dollar's coming from, and looking to survive, looking to put measures in place. And they've got all these balls in the air. You know, you've got property, you've got staff, and there's this thought about what's the most important thing. And of course, they all are. Everything's important, and they're having to deal with so much stuff at the same time.
Yeah. For me, I think they're all important, but I think there is an emphasis to be put on the people side.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What's going to take you forward. So if you have a strong enough vision that's compelling, that your people can understand and get behind, and they understand why you make the decisions, they know they'll be prepared to make the sacrifices needed for your company to survive because they understand where you're going. I was asked this morning, I was holding a webinar, and a gentleman said to me, well, does the impact of Glassdoor and Indeed.com actually really matter going forward? Because companies can then pick, there'll be so many people to pick from. Does it really matter whether they have a good review or not? And I thought it was a great question, but my answer is still yes, because as we move forward, companies are going to have to change how they do their offerings. Their customers will want different things because everything is changing so much. And therefore technology will adapt. And, you know, if you and I, Brian, are competitors, what's going to differentiate us actually isn't the technology, it's the innovation and creativity. And therefore you want the best people to want to work for you, and therefore to attract the best people, you want to have a really amazing culture that's transparent, open, and it's okay where you can admit mistakes, even as the leaders, to go, that didn't work, this is why we're moving forward. And I think there is a lot to be said around being open and transparent and being okay to make mistakes. Just keep making decisions until you get to the right one, but keep moving forward.
I think I was listening to a book yesterday, Daniel Pink book. Is it Daniel Pink? I think it's Daniel Pink. Talking about economists being asked a question back in the 90s. You know, who do you think is going to survive out of these two scenarios? Microsoft with their MSN encyclopedia, or a completely free open source encyclopedia? And of course, MSN. It was called MSN something else. I forget what it was called now, but that was wound up, and Wikipedia is now the encyclopedia of choice, whether you believe it or not. Now, with all these people, with all the people that we imagine are going to be out of work at some point in the not too distant future, I've written recently about how smaller businesses may be affected locally by people that they've trained into their business and they've let go. The natural thing for those individuals to do now is to set up in competition with the people they were working with before. Bring those two phenomena together, and you've got a lot of people working very skillfully, potentially together, against what was the might of the corporation. And I reckon that's going to be quite a significant trend in the future, where you see collectives working much more meaningfully, not in a structured manner, but in a more concerted manner to make a difference and actually pinpoint targets of business, targets in business, where companies may own a niche at the moment. They're going to see a lot of competition because smaller operators can work very, very effectively in small ways. Put those together and it becomes a big old ball when it gets rolling.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody this morning, a potential client, about they've got a very solid business, but they're very narrow in what they do, and I was talking to them about having an open ecosystem, developing a system of partners that makes their offer seem much more complete than it currently does. And we were having the conversation about not too distant future, there are going to be a lot of people on the market who will be like you say, Tristan, will be setting up. And you'll have a lot of expertise out there that you can plug into your business. Even if you're not employing them, you can plug it in to your ecosystem, which might plug a gap that you currently have, or you're not, or it provides more opportunities for another income stream or something, which they're now doing. They're now going off and mapping this sort of thing. And I think yes, I think you're right. I think that's. And I think that's a general thing for lots of people, lots of businesses. That there's going to be a lot of talent out there that it won't be employed, and they're going to want to find homes to live in. And I think this extending your offer to take in people from the outside, you might not employ, but help your business, is going to be quite a big movement. It already is. It already is.
Well, again, something I wrote recently about migration being the mother of invention. So in some cases, you take people out of context and drop them into a position of absolute necessity that they make some money quickly to feed the family or whatever. And, people become prepared to do very different things in that situation. And I think we will see much more preparedness across different communities to take on things maybe they hadn't thought of before. And I'm not talking about menial tasks. I'm talking about creative business that they probably would never have considered, but they find themselves with a skill set that they've been trained to do.
And I think people get more innovative in that sort of environment.
Completely. Yeah. Well, I think at the moment there's a lot of chat on the news about the cost of the economy and the cost of the thought just came to me when you were talking, Brian, is that you talk about an ecosystem. We've seen the kind of ecosystem that is going to develop for lots of people, but I call it an ecosystem where you may go onto a consultancy and find 30, 40 consultants there. Those people don't work for the brand that's presenting them. They're just a face on a page. My face appears on a couple of consultancy pages as an associate. I'll probably talk to those people once in my life. It's not true for everybody, but it's it can be like that. I think that kind of egocentricity will break down as well, and the people that work as collectives won't be quite so interested in getting their face on LinkedIn.
Absolutely agree. No, I'm talking about a proper mutually beneficial relationship. That's the thing, and it's that energy that will keep the thing rolling. If you're plugged into something and it doesn't work, you'll go somewhere else, because you can.
And right there, you have the emotion that we're told and we believe, because we've seen it to be true, that brands have to generate with their consumers, that emotional connection with the brand values.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah.
So corporates are facing a lot more pressure than the immediate financial one. So maybe it's not all bad news, Rachel. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pain, obviously, but there is opportunity here, I think, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. There always is. It's about finding the opportunities, being creative and innovative, whether you're on your own or as part of a large organisation, and anything in between. It's finding those opportunities.
Yeah, and it's also having the strong belief that you're doing the right thing, because everybody's going to have issues. I mean, the economy going south is going to affect us all at times, and whether you might be doing okay now or you're doing badly now, it might change both ways going forward. And I think you've got to have this belief that what you believe in and what you're doing is strong, and keep moving forward, and find the right people to work with, find the right type of client to go after, and be really sure about your market. That still is true. That still is true. And I think if you've got that belief, you as you say, Trish, the clients will show you the love, because you're being authentic, you're being clear. I was just writing some of the words you were saying. There's very little clarity at the moment, and I think anybody that can produce clarity in how they're going about things, whether you're looking after your staff, the way you're talking to your clients, the way you bring your new partners in, will survive better than those who have no clarity. Let's put it that way, I think.
Yeah, well, that's probably a good place to finish. We said we'd keep this one short and sweet. I think we've covered a lot of ground in 20 minutes. So thank you both, and we'll meet again next week and do it again in a week.
Yeah, in a week. Take care.
And you. Thanks a lot.
Bye.